The main issue here is okay. Now, first of all, let me address the easier thing. Okay, the easier thing is that this brain activity that precedes conscious knowledge of it, uh, that's already, but even before neurology showed that, I believe that, or at least before I heard it, I think that's fairly recent. But in the sense that I read it from philosophers well before anything was known about that, except for the fact that the brain was nerves and the idea that the brain was material. In other words, you can just draw this from an idea of an embodied brain. You're going to have these activities before consciousness. Consciousness is not obviously aware of everything in the mind, right? It's limited, whereas the mind is the whole thing, including this unlimited part that is the whole thing. Okay, unlimited in the sense that the whole thing, in some sense, has access to the whole thing. But not all parts have access to all other parts. And the consciousness is a kind of an interesting special part that has some sort of access to various parts. And it's almost as if we might be able to argue any thought could become conscious, because we have so many unconscious thoughts. If you just think about them, you can make them conscious. But we know that there's basic brain functions which probably the design is not necessarily able to become conscious. But even that's hard. Like the beating of the heart, you can even make that conscious and slow it down. And it's an interesting thing to study how that works, how you accomplish that. You don't just take hold of your heart and beat it when you think beat, beat, beat. You think other thoughts that influence it less directly than that. Okay, so what that proves, now that they have the EKGs or whatever that are proving that, showing that, is that the will is unconscious, that there's definitely parts of the will that are unconscious. And as I said, I've always believed that. It appears just from introspection that the conscious will is merely watching and judging and visualizing. And that's how the image processing works, is visualization. You have images, they give you an idea of multiple images. You could follow sort of a visualization of a set of images, which you can then see in iconic, in thumbnail form and follow. And if you want to, you can even follow more than one by various means of mental gymnastics. And this is the process of the will. It is not atomic, it's distributed. Every part of the body that is living is willing in some way. The cells that all they will is to have sugar and to create this protein, or I think I'll create more of this. These all, to me, are very fungible elements of will. And so all the things that people assume about will, that it's the cause of the action and all this, nope, I'm not assuming that. Certainly I don't say that about the conscious will. There's an unconscious aspect of will. And again, mere introspection seems to show that. Seems to show that there's a part of will that comes on its own accord, but if you believe it's embodied, then it's not coming from outer space, it's coming from the rest of your neural system and even your body. In other words, for example, your hormones and sugar levels and various things are influencing it. Okay, now onto the harder part. So that doesn't contradict my idea of will at all. Onto the harder part, you're talking about your argument that since it's material causes and material effects, therefore everything is basically kind of dead and material. But you're assuming that material is dead. You're taking an implicit, subtle, built-in dualist approach because you're using a criteria, right, that is assuming material isn't living. How are you going to get the living into the unliving? No, obviously a reductive idea of this phenomena, whether it's free or not, is that whatever the components of living will are, whatever those elemental components, they're in the physical elements. It's the materials themselves. Just like the magnetic fields are in the atoms of this pencil, but the whole thing, because of the arrangement, doesn't express it. Some element of will has to be in the atoms, but the arrangement doesn't allow it to be expressed. Okay, that's the inevitable reductive assumption. So the material that it starts from has this quality And through a rearrangement, a transformation, it can in fact express the quality. Through a rearrangement of the atoms in this pencil, we could have an expression of magnetism that we could see as magnetism. Through a rearrangement of the materials, we see an expression of life. And, we're going to, in a sense, be able to prove that part of this idea if we ever make a synthetic life form. Like they've made now, just recently, synthetic DNA. So you can make the whole cell just from some carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and whatnot, and spray it all together into a living form, and it starts living. Then clearly in material things can transform into a living arrangement. And scientifically you would say, yeah, well, the elements of that have to be in there. And you could continue to look at which elements they were and why they didn't express themselves macroscopically. In other words, the nature of this alignment. All right, cheers. Good video. Thank you. I subscribe to you. Bye.